Okay, so you downloaded Fusion 360. Before we take this thing out for a test drive, let's go over some of the controls real quick. So hop up here to Preferences. This is how I have mine set up. You don't have to, but in order to make sure that we all have the same buttons and controls, let's just make sure we're on the same. So default modeling orientation, Z up, that's how I have mine set up. Pan, zoom, orbit controls. I set mine to SolidWorks. We'll go over that in a second. Free orbit here. And the only other thing that I changed, I think, is design. Default units for new design. I actually normally work in millimeters, but for these videos, I've moved over to inches. Whatever you want to do. You don't have to do inches or millimeters. You could work in feet. You could work in whatever you want. So, okay. So in order to drive around and navigate, or steering wheel, if you will, if you want to do this, this is called an orbit command. That is orbiting around your object. To do that, you click down on your scroll wheel on your mouse. If you have this set into Fusion, I think you actually have to hit Shift and hold Shift as you click around. Otherwise, you're going to pan left and right. To zoom in and out, like that, you roll your click wheel up and down. Another way to do this is if you're working on, say, a trackpad, God bless your soul, you can move this little box around. So this little box, you can hit front, and you can get a front view of your object. If you hit right, it'll snap towards the right view. You hit top, it'll snap towards the top view, and these little arrows here will actually rotate your object if it snapped to the wrong view. You can also hit this little corner here, and that'll look at an isometric view of your thing. Hit this little kind of a bird's eye view. You know, this is your God's eye. This is a bird's eye view. So yeah, that is your controls. Really annoying if you can't do that. So over here. We have our document browser. Don't worry about that. That's going to be the name of this thing. We haven't saved it yet. We haven't given it a name, so don't worry about that. Document settings. So if you click here, you can actually change your units rather than having to go back into settings and all that stuff real quick. Again, we're working in inches, so I'm not going to change that. Name views, don't worry about that. So we have something here. If we hide our thing for a second, our origin. This is just our 0, 0, 0. It's a starting point of being able to draw. Don't worry about X, Y, Z. I never really use those. All right, so now we have our X, Y, X, Z, and Y, Z planes. What are planes? Well, let's just go back to our basics. Let's go back into Paint. So say, for instance, we want to model a box of chocolates. This is what our chocolate box may look like, right? Something like that. That. Now, if we want to draw this in, if we want to do this from a different viewpoint, we could look at this box of chocolate straight down, and that would be our top view. Does that make sense? So this would be chocolates. Big font, right from the top, looking straight down. That's our box of chocolates. Now, we also have something called a if we want to look at the right side, we could look at the right side of a box of chocolates. So this would be chocolates. But that would be, smaller font. And then maybe we have our barcodes over here. Doink, 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 barcode. And if we want to look at the front view, this is what we might see. Right? So we have our chocolates. And then we also have our barcode over here. So this would be our top view. This would be our side view. And this would be, our side view or right view. Let's just say we're looking at it from the right side. And this would be our front view if we're looking at the front of our object. Escape? Yeah, escape. Does that make sense? So we have a top view looking straight down on our object. We have a right view if we're looking at the right side of our object. And we have a front view looking at the front side of our object. So Fusion calls these X, Y. So let's just get out of Fusion real quick. I don't like how they do this, so let's take SolidWorks for instance. Say we want to make our box of chocolates here. Well, we can start from our top plane. Start a sketch, don't worry about that. Start with our center box, start in our center, our origin here, and make our box of chocolates from looking down. Okay, now if we wanted to pop that up, we can. call that like an inch. And now we have our box of chocolates in 3D. We have our front view looking at the front. We can have a top view of looking at the top down, and we have a right view looking at it this way. So why do we start on the top? Well, we actually don't have to. If we wanted to, so if we can actually delete this thing, delete, yes, delete, yes. So what if we wanted to model this from our right view? So we looked at it this way. If we want to model this from the right side, well, we can. So if we go back into SolidWorks, we can hit our right plane, draw a sketch, do our center rectangle, start from the center, and then we want to extrude it out super long. So in this case, we wanted it to be, what is it, say 14 inches. You type in 14 inch, enter. Magically, we have our box of chocolates again. Now if we go top view, same thing. Front view looks about the same, and then right view looks about the same. We could also model if we wanted, say, from the front. So if we just go in, delete this, delete, delete, and then let's say we started on the front plane and we want to sketch an object there. Well, again, we can. So this is what the front of our chocolates may look like. Enter. And we want to extrude that back or forwards, doesn't really matter. 5 inches. Enter. Magically, we have our same box of chocolates. So this, we have our front plane, top plane, and looking at the right. So front view, top view, right view. We can do the same thing in Fusion, but they just call their planes XY, XZ, and YZ. A little bit harder to follow along, but I don't know why they did this. But we can look at our top view, front view, and right view. It's doing the same thing. So if we start with our corner view, we can see our XY plane, in this case, would be our top plane. So if we started a sketch here, well, we can do the same thing. We create our little rectangle, starting in the center, and working our way out. And then we can pull that up to be our box of chocolates. Right? So if we have our top view, we're looking straight down on it. Our front view, working at the front of it. And our right view, we're looking at the side of it. Again, you don't have to do from the top. In the case of a box of chocolates, it's really easy to model on all of the sides. But what if we want to model something like a door wedge? So let's get out of this. We can delete our box. We can delete our sketch. So if we want to model a door wedge, for instance, what would a door wedge look like? Well, let's go back into Paint. A door wedge looks kind of like this, right? If we're looking at it from the side, we have our wedge here. And this comes back here, and this goes up. Well, what is our front view going to look like if we're looking at it from this way? Well, our front view is actually going to look like this, right? If we're staring straight down the front. Now, our side view is going to look, so let's just say front. Our side would look like this. So side. And then what is our other one? So we can look at the front, we can look at the side, and our side is looking at it this way. So front. And what's our last view? We have our top view if we're looking straight down on it, right? Top view. And our top view would look something, well, like this. So if we want to model this in, if we want to model this in, say, Fusion or SolidWorks, well, let's go out of here. Let's delete this and delete this. Yes. So if we wanted to model, say, our front view of this thing, well, what if we did that? If we went to front, normal, and we wanted to draw that box, great. We modeled that box, but if we want to extrude it, which is all we can do, we can only push-pull things, well, we can't get that wedge. Doesn't really work. We can only make a box out of it. And likewise, if we delete snap, yep. Likewise, what was that, front? If we did our top view looking down on it, same thing. If we make our square, all we can do is make a box out of it. Doesn't really work. But delete. Yes. If we take our side view and model our side view, say our right side, and we made a wedge. Yay. And we extrude it. Now we have our wedge. So we could actually only make this wedge from one view. Whoa, that's a weird looking doorstop. Let's just, whoop. Right, does that make sense? In this case, we can only model from the right side. So let's go back in Fusion and try this. Starting from the corner, we want to model this from the right. Right? So that's where we want to model. So if we look at our planes here, looks like we want to start on the YZ plane. So we right click that and create a sketch. Now let's do the same thing. Let's create a line up here, line down, and line over. Now if we do something called a push-pull or an extrude, you hit Q, click it, and now we have our wedge. And, hit OK. Great. So we can hit our front view, and we have our rectangle. We can have our top view, and we're looking at the top view down, and we have our right view, which came in at a little bit of a weird angle. And we have our right view. So those are kind of fundamentals of how we're looking around. You got to pick which plane makes sense for you to draw your object. Now you don't have to, you could start at it doesn't really matter what plane you start on, as long as it just kind of makes sense. So if we actually did this, say we accidentally were in, if we delete this for a second, delete, and delete this sketch. So say we actually started accidentally in the top plane. So what does that look like? This would be our top view. Well, whoops, if we accidentally created a sketch here, create a line, down, and over, no problem, you can still do that. Push, pull it, no problem, okay, and we still have our wedge. One problem is we kind of created this sideways. So if we do our front view now, we get our rectangle, and we get a right view, and we get another rectangle. We just kind of built this thing sideways instead of from the bottom up. Doesn't really matter how you do this. It's just, if you pick the wrong plane, your viewpoints are going to be a little bit different. So just pay attention to that. So this video is starting to get a little bit long. I was going to start going into sketches here, but I'll just save that for the next video. Sketches are very important. It's kind of fundamental to how you work in CAD. But yeah, we will talk about that later, and I'll see you next time.